are you, my old pal, David?
I'm good. I really enjoy when you do the intro because formula for success is so difficult to say.
It's not. It's easy.
Well, try and say it again.
Formula for success.
Formula. You missed out the R.
Oh, but
formula.
I know it too, but I always miss out the H's in Coulthard.
Yeah, well, look, my second name is definitely complicated for people.
Well, it is complicated. I'm glad you said that.
Anyway, I'm very happy to see you, EJ, because we haven't seen each other for a wee while, and that's good, isn't it? Because absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Well, there's a bit of traction with this podcast because people are saying to me, "Do you really hate him?" And I said, absolutely worse than you could ever imagine.
What do you mean you really hate me? I didn't know you really hate me.
And then they say, no, you can't. You get on really good together in that podcast. And I said, well, I would get on a lot better if I had more of his cash. But he's Scottish and he has never, every pound is a prisoner with him. And he still has his confirmation money, that guy. And that's the kind of thing I have with him.
Well, I don't even know what confirmation money is. That's probably something
you don't have that in your religion. Well, when you're good Irish Catholic boys, they're all confirmed. And everyone gives you money. So when you have your confirmation money, it means you never spent a penny.
Okay. All right. Well, look, every day is a school day. Thank you for that education from the Right Honourable Reverend Eddie Jordan. We're going to take a couple of listener questions. And this one here is from Matthew Brown. So he goes, Dear EGA, I was lucky to win a prize to attend the 2000 British Grand Prix as a VIP guest of Jaguar Racing. A certain Scottish driver won a damp and tricky race. That'll be me. Oh. Did I ever tell you about the time I won the British Grand Prix?
I think if you haven't, you've now have done so. And go on. It becomes extremely boring when you go on with this kind of crap.
I agree. But let's move on then. So he got to see John Watson, the first driver in a Jordan, the 191. He shook that down for you at Silverstone. He got to interview Johnny Herbert, one of your first managed drivers. He got to see Eddie Irvine as well, someone else that you actually own.
Nobody
most
escaped.
Of these drivers.
You were the only one.
I don't know how I managed to slip through the net.
Everyone paid their dues except you.
There you go. So this is quite a long question, so I'll continue on. He said, Johnny was the consummate professional, but when John asked Eddie how the car was handling, apparently Eddie replied that the car was shit and terrible to drive. Now, apparently that's true. Is that the way Eddie Irvine would answer questions about whether the car was good or bad?
It'd usually be worse. There was far more expletives in there. But then Eddie Irvine was a class. He was different to anyone else.
So the question ultimately is, how did you deal with Eddie Irvine? Because you managed him, you helped sell him onto Ferrari. Were you still involved with him as a manager when he left the team? Or what's the story with Eddie?
Well, Eddie Irvine, I'm not sure if I'm at liberty to say this part. I'm not going to mention the numbers. Anyway. No, I'm not. I will tell you the story, but I'm not going to tell you the amounts.
Okay.
But he was so super clever. There's very few drivers in all of the drivers that I've had that can come up to the level of intelligence or nous, just knowing what to do. And I remember I had a year left on his contract. And I think in the previous show I mentioned the fact that in Budapest I went to see Jean Todt, and I went to great lengths to tell him that he should consider Irvine instead of Gerhard Berger, who was leaving the team. And I said that Irvine was the perfect guy for him. And when I went to Lugano to do the deal, because they asked could I talk to me, Irvine had been in a nightclub until the middle of the morning, and he wasn't able to get out of the plane to go to the meeting, which is absolutely true. And so when I went to the meeting to meet the lawyer, Henri Peter, and I explained everything, did a deal as best I could. And there was one amazing part of the deal that I was so proud of myself, came back to Irvine, and I felt I was in top drawer. And that one particular part of the contract was simple. I said, I can't agree to this, guys. Because this is my client and this is how I'm representing. Yes, I agree with the money and I agree with this, that and the other and the contract, the duration and the terms basically on the conditions of the contract which were valid. And there was one part of it that I wouldn't agree. And that was a clause in there that said that if a notice was given during the race that Irvine would have to move out of the way for Michael, which was in everybody's contract. And because my argument was, why should he do that? And then you not pay him the points money that he could have had. And then they started to look at each other and I said, well, I think I've got them a little bit here. Because I was trying to make the point, it's grossly unfair and it's immoral to actually ask somebody to do something as a favour and then penalise him for not getting those points money. So what I got them to agree, and I promise you it was the deal of a life, I got them to agree to give Irvine the same number and amount per point as Michael was getting. And I thought that was such a great deal. And when I came back and told Irvine that. However, it gets worse. The next day, as his customer, he lived in Oxford and he came down for the breakfast and he was sitting there with Marie and the kids before they were going to school. And he said, "Oh, EJ, I love this team. I don't think I'll go." And he said, "Sorry, Irvine, you're going." And he said, "I love Marie, I love the team, I love everything that I stand for here. You've made it possible. Look at the life I've got, and I've got an offer from Ferrari, but I don't want to go. I want to stay with Jordan. I've got one more year in the contract. I feel it's the right thing to do." Now, I knew exactly what he was at. He was asking for a bit of a payoff, and I wasn't giving him any payoff. But eventually, good old Irvine, he was as sharp as a nail. He knew I would eventually pay him because I'd obviously struck a deal with Ferrari. I said to him, "Listen, Ferrari, that's him sorted. Now, what about the Jordan contract?" He said, "What about the Jordan contract?" "Well, he's got a year left in his contract. You have to buy this contract from me." And Ferrari had to pay me and pay me handsomely. And then Irvine, the bastard, he came and knew this and he nicked a very significant amount of that money for himself. Now, can you believe that?
I think the word nicked is not the appropriate word in that sentence. He negotiated. He leveraged his position.
He broke my balls, David.
Well, many people have probably tried that over the years, but that particular clause that you mentioned, when I was talking to Ferrari, it was the reason why.
You considered by Ferrari?
I had the first negotiation, and when I turned it down, they then went to you to get Irvine. And it was Bernie Ecclestone who called me, and I was actually with my manager from IMG at the time, and he said, "Are you interested in going to Ferrari?" And I said, "Well, every driver would be interested in going to Ferrari at some point." And he went away and did whatever he was doing. And it led to a meeting with Jean Todt in Paris, his apartment there. And we got to the point of the contract. And the thing that I couldn't agree to was if I was running fourth and Michael was fifth, I would have to move over if I was third, and all those numbers. Now, of course, in the fullness of time, we know that Michael was a better driver and he would very rarely find himself behind me. But it was just I couldn't commit myself to knowing that I didn't have an equal chance of going for the win or whatever the position was. So in a different mindset maybe than you were negotiating for Eddie. But as soon as that meeting had taken place, Ron Dennis found out because I was already contracted to McLaren. And he phoned me up and said, "What's this? You want to go to Ferrari?" And I said, "Well, I didn't say I want to go to Ferrari, but I've been approached and everything." So I never went to Ferrari, and they obviously had that conversation with you. So well done, you. You got what you wanted. Eddie, definitely I can confirm, is one of the sharpest characters. I think we should mention at this point.
We should get him on the show.
We should definitely get him on the show. And I tell you who else is sharp and brilliant is his sister, Sonia. Sonia was with Eddie for a number of years as his physio. And then she took up residence here in Monaco and she built a business which she sold on called Amber Lounge.
Yeah,
and which is a good friend of ours, brilliant woman, mother. Definitely I would rather be cast away on an island with her than her brother Eddie. But not because of the physical thing, but
I'm telling Irvine this. I'm telling Eddie this.
Look, he would rather be on an island with his sister than on an island with me. But anyway,